I just had the worst 48 hours of my life. So I moved to a different state about 5 years ago, but I still come back to my hometown regularly to visit family and friends. Depending on the duration of my trip, I'll only make plans with certain people. So my main focus this time around was one of my oldest friends, Jen. Jen and her boyfriend have been together for around 2 years now. They have their struggles, but for the most part, I have never seen her as happy in a relationship as she is with him. Not to sound narcissistic, but I am a fairly attractive woman, and I date other women almost exclusively. So I will actively make it a point to let others know that I want nothing to do with their men. As rude as it sounds, I won't even make eye contact with another girl's boyfriend to avoid any kind of confrontation. Jen, however, doesn't have many friends. So if she's not at work, she's with him 100% of the time. As a result, she wanted the two of us to meet and be able to hang out together as some kind of trio. So she planned a 2-day trip to Disney. Right off the bat, nothing about the scenario was ideal for me. I will always put manners first, but I had no intentions of being his friend. Not only because of my rule against it, but he's just not my type of person. 2 days was also taking a significant part of the trip since it didn't include drive time. Not to mention I've had a lifelong hatred for Disney. She was so excited when she was planning it that I couldn't tell her no. But I also have a mild mood regulation problem, so it was hard to hide my disdain. Especially after I found out that we were sharing a room in our Airbnb, which we were also sharing with 7 other people. Jen and her boyfriend, I'll call him Cal, let me know quiet time was at 10 and left to go see a movie as soon as we got to the Airbnb. Our neighbors continued to be loud until 3 a.m. So at this point, I was thoroughly pissed off. And all I really wanted to do was smoke some Zaza. I also regularly bring edibles for her to take when I travel since she doesn't like smoking. I gave her a full pack's worth of several kinds of edibles, and by the trip, she only had 2 left. So when Cal texted me asking for some, I assumed he was saving the other ones for her. I feel like a plug whenever I'm around them. So I treated this like a business interaction, even though it weirded me out that he didn't just ask me verbally. He waited until she was in the shower around 11 p.m., then only took male 5 of a chocolate piece and handed me the other half. I'm a very heavy daily smoker, so I felt nothing, and really only took it so he wouldn't throw it away. I have no idea why, but he didn't seem to want her to take any. I haven't slept well since my vacation started, so I was awake literally all night. At around 3 a.m., he texted me again asking me if I was okay. I was less weirded out by this because she was asleep, and neither of us wanted to risk waking her up, and I told him I just couldn't sleep. He said he wanted to go do something, but didn't know what. So I suggested we go for a walk since I had been wanting to check out the neighborhood and was too scared to go alone. I left the room before him because he hadn't even gotten up and waited on the porch for a minute. I thought he was just dragging behind, but now I think he was trying to make sure she was still asleep and wouldn't notice both of us gone. We only made it about 3 houses down before he started getting weird. He told me to feel his hand because he didn't feel real, and when I did, he laced his fingers between mine and wouldn't let go until I shook my whole arm to get him off. I was already really uncomfortable at that point, and I tried to politely shut him down by reminding him that his girlfriend is my best friend, and I would never do something like what he was suggesting. He said, okay, and I started walking back to the house when he grabbed me by the throat, shoved me into a tree, and kissed me. His other hand was trying to get up my shorts, so I shoved him off me and told him to stop. He said okay again, and we walked in silence back to the house. I didn't want to go into our room because I was nervous, so I went to the kitchen and got some water when he followed me and did it a second time. This time, he pushed me up against the wall of our room, and I hit him in a moment of panic. Not hard, just a slap at best. But I told him it's not happening and went back to my bed. He continued to text me in bed next to her, saying all kinds of inappropriate things, and when I wouldn't respond, he would sit up and stare at me from their bed. The only replies I would give were very pointed ones, trying to politely shake him off. At one point, he tried to lean down and kiss me again, but I put my head under the blankets and pretended not to notice. The final straw of the night was when he started begging me to make out with him so he would go to sleep. It was already 6 o'clock in the morning at that point, so I just closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep until I eventually did fall asleep. We had to leave early the next morning to get into the park. So I'd asked Jen to wake me up when they were ready. She tried, but I was so tired from that night I just rolled over and fell asleep again. Then he tried by touching my neck, and that woke me right the frick up. I went to smack his hand away, and I was instantly put in a bad mood. He didn't try anything for the rest of the day at the park, likely because Jen was around. So eventually the mood lightened, and we all started having fun. On the ride back, I was getting nervous because I was scared he was going to try something again that night. And I guess I was putting out bad energy because they both kept asking me if I was okay. I had gone completely nonverbal for a while, and I think it annoyed Jen because they left again. But I didn't get an invitation this time. He forgot his wallet in the room and came back for it. When he went to leave again, he said, "I'll be right back, baby girl," and tried to hug me. I pushed him away and said nothing when he asked if I was okay. I have what I would describe as high-functioning anxiety. No matter how bad it gets, I'm usually able to push it down and do what I need to do. But as soon as they left, I called another one of my friends, Tia, and just completely broke down. She eventually managed to distract me enough to relax until they got back, at which point I hung up so they wouldn't hear us talking. When they got back, I was curled up facing the wall, so they started to unwind for the night. Jen went to get changed in the bathroom, and he sat on the end of my bed watching the TV. But the texts immediately started up again. He asked me for more edibles, but there was no chance I'm ever giving him any again after the shoot he pulled. Especially because I feel like he was using being high as an excuse to try shoot with me. So I told him to ask Jen because I knew he wouldn't. I started shaking and could feel the panic setting in. So I texted Tia again, and she FaceTimed me, so I would have an excuse to leave. Jen was already back in the room, and he still wouldn't move from my bed. So I sat up, asked her about the smoking policy, and was met with a straight attitude. I was already wildly upset at that point, so I snapped at her and left the room. Tia heard it all on the phone and tried helping me come up with a plan to tell her. But her only solution was to tell Jen immediately and kick him out of the Airbnb and get an Uber home. Maybe it was selfish, but I wasn't going to do that. We had a 2-hour ride awaiting us the next day, and our room was quite small, plus I had no desire to be around when they had that conversation. I went back to the room and saw them cuddling in bed, and it just made me sick to my stomach. So I collected my paraphernalia and went for a walk while I smoked. It was pouring rain and my phone was starting to lose connection on FaceTime, so I wasn't out long. He tried texting me a few more times before I outright told him I'm not interested and to stop. He tried to play it off like he wasn't doing anything wrong, and I ignored him for the rest of the night. I didn't even care about the staring anymore. I was just angry. Now for an update. He begged me not to tell her, but I absolutely am. I just don't know how. I'm terrified of her reaction, and I will do just about anything to avoid conflict. I'm afraid she's going to blame me and stay with him, or if they break up and she still blames me. I've already come to terms with the fact that I can't be her friend anymore if she stays with him. It just breaks my heart because she seems to be so genuinely happy. Any and all advice is appreciated. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Invite her out and tell her directly while he isn't present. Show her the texts and go through the timeline. He will deny it and paint you as the villain. So I would talk about that ahead of time with her to prepare against the foreseeable gaslighting from him. Avoid contact with him and block him. Since he tried to force himself on you, I would also be wary of having your friend confront him alone. He's past the point of red flags. These are blinking warning lights, as he had a clear agenda with having you as a guest at their apartment. Comment 2. Hang on, you won't make eye contact with another girl's boyfriend to avoid drama, but you said yes to walking with one outside at 3 a.m. while his girlfriend was asleep? I'm really confused about your boundaries. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through this. So, after that nightmare of a trip, I decided to stay a few extra days in town to figure out how to handle the situation with Jen and Cal. I couldn't just leave things hanging like that. I spent a lot of time thinking about how to tell Jen without causing a huge blow-up. I was also scared of losing her as a friend, but I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. 2 days after the Disney trip, I finally mustered up the courage to talk to Jen. I invited her to a coffee shop we used to frequent in high school, hoping the familiar setting would make the conversation a bit easier. I started by asking her how she felt about the trip, and she seemed genuinely happy, which made what I had to say even harder. I took a deep breath and told her everything that happened with Cal. I didn't sugarcoat it, but I also tried to be as gentle as possible. Jen's face went through a range of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, sadness. She didn't say much at first, just stared at her coffee cup. I could tell she was processing everything. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke. She thanked me for telling her and said she needed some time to think. I understood and told her I'd be there for her no matter what she decided. The next few days were tense. Jen didn't reach out and I didn't want to push her. I spent a lot of time with Tia, who was a great support through all of this. She kept reminding me that I did the right thing, even though it felt like my world was falling apart. I also had to deal with Cal's incessant texts, begging me not to ruin his relationship. I blocked his number, but the damage was already done. A week later, Jen finally called me. She sounded exhausted but resolute. She told me she confronted Cal, and he admitted to everything. They had a huge fight, and she kicked him out of their apartment. She said she needed some space from everyone, including me, to figure things out. I told her I understood and that I'd be here whenever she was ready to talk. During this time, I couldn't help but reflect on our friendship and how much it meant to me. Jen and I had been through so much together: high school drama, college stress, and now this. I remembered a time when we were both struggling with our mental health, and we made a pact to always be there for each other no matter what. That memory gave me hope that our friendship could survive this. A few days later, Jen called again. She sounded more like herself, though still a bit shaken. She apologized for needing space and thanked me again for telling her the truth. She said she realized that if I hadn't told her, she might have stayed in a toxic relationship for much longer. We talked for hours, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off both our shoulders. Jen decided to move back in with her parents for a while to get some distance from Cal and clear her head. She also started seeing a therapist to help her process everything. I was so proud of her for taking those steps. We made plans to hang out more often, just the two of us, to rebuild our friendship. As for Cal, he tried reaching out to Jen multiple times, but she blocked him on everything. She told me she realized that his behavior was a pattern and that she deserved better. It was a tough realization, but a necessary one. I could see her growing stronger every day, and it made me so happy. One evening, while we were having dinner at her parents' house, Jen opened up about her past relationships. She revealed that she had a history of dating controlling and manipulative people, and she always felt like she had to settle for less than she deserved. It was heartbreaking to hear, but it also explained a lot about why she stayed with Cal for so long. She said she was determined to break that cycle and focus on herself for a while. I also shared some of my own struggles with relationships and how I often felt like I had to prove myself to others. It was a deep emotional conversation that brought us even closer. We both realized that we had been carrying a lot of baggage from our pasts, and it was time to let go and move forward. In the end, the whole ordeal brought us closer together. Jen and I made a pact to always be honest with each other, no matter how hard it might be. We also promised to prioritize our own well-being and not let anyone else dictate our happiness. So that's where things stand now. Jen is doing much better, and our friendship is stronger than ever. We're both focusing on our own growth and supporting each other through it all. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for moving my depressed husband back to Canada and ruining his life? My husband Jeff and I have been married for 12 years. Jeff has depression. He has struggled with this since he was a teenager, and I knew it was an issue when we started dating. However, he seemed to be managing it fairly well at the time, without treatment, and he always perked up when we were together, so I just thought he had gloomy days sometimes. Here's some background on why he is currently so miserable. Our relationship almost ended when we had been dating for 6 months after we discovered that we had different feelings on kids. I likely wanted children when Jeff did not. In hindsight, it probably would have been better if we went separate ways at the time, but I loved him dearly. We stayed together because I thought Jeff was reconsidering his stance on kids, while he thought I was reconsidering mine. After we married, we moved to France for work and further training. We were happy those first few years in France. Life was good, but I had always viewed our time there as temporary. We went over with the intention to complete some further training and I always thought we would return to Canada. At some point, this changed for Jeff. He started a different job while in France that he absolutely loved, and that had the potential to be a long-term position. He started to foresee our future in France as a permanent arrangement. I didn't realize this at the time. After a few years in France, my biological clock started ticking and I wanted to start a family. Jeff had reservations, but I thought it was just cold feet. We talked about this for a year before we started trying, and we agreed that we would just have one kid. I was convinced that he would love fatherhood once he had the chance because he was good with his nephew. Things went sideways when we found out we were having twins. After they were born, Jeff's depression got worse. Many days he can't function because he is so annoyed by the children. The first few years with the twins in France were the most difficult time in my life. I was incredibly sleep deprived and sick all the time, pneumonia, strep throat, and countless other illnesses. I started to long to be closer to family who could help us out. My dream job opened up in our home city next to both sets of grandparents, and I jumped at the chance to apply. I thought it was a good opportunity for Jeff too, because this city has a government facility that he always wanted to work at. At least he talked earlier in our relationship about working there. I thought it was exactly what we wanted. A chance to move back to Canada to be closer to family, to help with the twins, and a chance for both of us to get dream jobs. If we had stayed in France, I would not have had a permanent position. We also would not have been able to afford to buy a house, and we would have had to stay in our small apartment. From my perspective, there were a lot of advantages to moving to Canada, but Jeff didn't see it that way. When I got the job in our home city, we left France. We bought a house close to both sets of grandparents, which has helped so much with children. The housing market was very competitive, and we bid on many houses before we were successful. I like our house, but it is not Jeff's dream house. It was difficult because it felt like we didn't have a lot of options. But Jeff continues to be unhappy about this too. Shortly after we moved here, he got an excellent job at the government facility that he used to talk about. Except he hates this job. It has become more of a managerial position, and he is not using the skills that he was trained in. He also has trouble getting along with his boss. In short, these factors have made Jeff miserable. Job he hates, house he hates. Children he never wanted, all in a country he doesn't want to live in. If he could have his way, it would be to go back to France forever, childless, and continue to do the job that he enjoyed there. He feels I ruined his life, and he reminds me of this regularly. I have offered to divorce him and set him free to return to France, but he always says that he wants to stay with me. He just wishes it was back to the happy years in our early marriage. I have offered to sell our house and build his dream house. I have also offered to help him find a job he loves in the city. But my suggestions are always rejected. I realize now that his depression is preventing him from improving the situation. He is wallowing in his misery and can't see a way to get out of it. I know he needs antidepressants and therapy, but he won't seek help. I feel horrible about the whole situation, and I've become depressed myself. I'm sure I am the AH for not listening better to what he wanted in life. But this post is not about our marriage troubles, as there is a bigger problem. However, you need to recognize the depths of Jeff's depression, unhappiness, and anger to understand the next part. Jeff is currently sick. His symptoms have been getting worse for months. I strongly suspect that it is cancer that started in the lymph nodes in his neck and has possibly spread to his lungs. He is not willing to go to a doctor because he is extremely unhappy and depressed, and he has nothing to live for. I have begged him to see a doctor, but each time he reminds me that this is the path he wants, unalived by critical illness. He repeats that I have gotten everything I want at the expense of his happiness, and that the one thing he wants now is to die on his terms. I have done everything I can think of to change his mind. Be a better wife if I can. Try to get him into therapy to get his depression treated, because then maybe he would get his cancer treated. But nothing helps. I have not told anyone, family or friends, about the depths of our problems or Jeff's health. I could use some advice. Is there anything I can do to make this situation better? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Jeff is a grown man who can make his own decisions. You are a grown woman who can make her own decisions. You can either decide to communicate with your husband in a straightforward way and let him live his life making the decisions he wants to make, or you can continue being codependent and randomly guessing at what it is he apparently likes or dislikes. Comment 2, maybe he doesn't have cancer, but something curable and he won't die. He will just live with symptoms for years, LOL. He seems to think this is his way out, but it might not be. It's better to get the diagnosis and let yourself die than to assume death is a year away when it's actually not. Now for the update. Thanks for reading my last post. Over the past month, things have taken a turn for the worse, and I'm at my wit's end. Jeff's health has continued to decline rapidly. He's lost a significant amount of weight, and his energy levels are almost non-existent. He spends most of his days in bed, barely eating or drinking. I've tried everything to get him to see a doctor, but he remains adamant about not seeking medical help. His refusal is not just stubbornness, it's a manifestation of his deep depression and desire to end his life on his own terms. This has put an enormous strain on me, both emotionally and physically. I'm constantly worried about him, and it's affecting my ability to function at work and take care of the twins. One particularly difficult day, I found Jeff in the bathroom, struggling to breathe. His face was pale, and he looked like he was in immense pain. I panicked and called an ambulance, despite his protests. When the paramedics arrived, Jeff was furious with me. He kept saying that I was taking away his last bit of control over his life. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed my worst fears. Jeff has advanced stage cancer. They wanted to start treatment immediately, but Jeff refused. He signed himself out of the hospital against medical advice and came home, more despondent than ever. The fallout from this incident has been severe. Jeff barely speaks to me now, and when he does, it's filled with resentment. He accuses me of betraying him and not respecting his wishes. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around him, trying to avoid triggering another outburst. The twins have started to notice the tension, and they're acting out more than usual. I'm trying to shield them from the worst of it, but it's becoming increasingly difficult. In the midst of all this, I've had to take on more responsibilities at work. My boss has been understanding to a point, but there's only so much leeway they can give me. I'm constantly exhausted, juggling work, the kids, and Jeff's deteriorating condition. I've reached out to a few close friends for support, but I haven't told them the full extent of what's going on. I'm afraid of how they'll react and what they'll think of Jeff and me. One evening, while I was putting the twins to bed, Jeff had a particularly bad episode. He was in so much pain that he couldn't even get out of bed. I sat with him holding his hand, and he finally opened up a bit. He told me about his childhood, how his father had been a strict, unloving man who never showed any affection. Jeff's mother had been the opposite, warm and caring, but she died when he was young. He said that he's always felt like he's been living in his father's shadow, never good enough, never able to find happiness. This was a side of Jeff I had never seen before, and it broke my heart to hear him talk about his past with such sadness. But before I could process this new information, Jeff's condition took another turn for the worse. He started coughing up blood, and I had no choice but to call an ambulance again. This time, the doctor said that without immediate treatment, Jeff wouldn't have much time left. They managed to stabilize him, but he's still refusing any long-term treatment. He's back home now, and I'm trying to make him as comfortable as possible, but it feels like I'm just waiting for the inevitable. In the midst of all this chaos, I've had to confront some harsh truths about myself. I've realized that I've been so focused on what I thought was best for our family that I didn't really listen to what Jeff wanted. I pushed him into a life he never wanted, and now we're both paying the price. I've been trying to make amends, but it feels like it's too little, too late. I've also had to face the reality that I can't do this alone. I've started looking into hospice care for Jeff, hoping that they can provide some relief for both of us. It's a difficult decision, but I know it's the right one. I've also reached out to a therapist for myself, trying to find a way to cope with everything that's happening. It's a small step, but it's something. As for the future, I don't know what it holds. Jeff's condition is worsening by the day, and I'm bracing myself for the worst. I'm trying to stay strong for the twins, but it's hard when I feel like I'm falling apart inside. I've started to think about what life will be like without Jeff, and it's a terrifying thought. But I know I have to keep going for the sake of our children, if nothing else. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for refusing to let my parents meet my girlfriend's family? in their filthy house. I've been with my girlfriend for 3 years, long distance. I'm incredibly happy with her and she is with me. We communicate effectively, talk about our future with pragmatism, love, and confidence, and overall have a very healthy relationship. We don't live together. She lives with her parents while she finishes school, and I live alone with a full-time job. I'm close with my parents, and they are supportive of my relationship. My parents have never met her parents in person. However, in the 3 years we've been together, due to the nature of our long-distance relationship, the easiest way for our parents to meet would be for my parents to go to her house, and we could have a nice family dinner. It would also give my parents a chance to learn more culturally about my girlfriend and her family. But I am really embarrassed to have them over to my girlfriend's house. I very recently visited and stayed with my girlfriend and her folks for a week in their home. It is filthy. Not messy as in items are strewn about or water bottles and pizza boxes litter rooms. Filthy as in everything is coated in a thick layer of dirt. Cleaning glasses and dishes amounts to scrubbing them gently for 5 seconds with an old gray sponge. And when the dog pees inside, it's cleaned with a mop that is then put back into a bucket and put outside. At the end of my week's stay with them, I felt more gross than when I first got there because stepping out of the shower instantly coats your feet in hair and dirt. There are more examples than this, but I think the point is made. Unfortunately, these things are considered normal to my girlfriend, I believe. We made dinner for her family, and I subtly mentioned cleaning the kitchen up as a thank you for letting me stay in their home. I also mentioned cleaning up the guest room I was staying in for the same reason. Her responses were shocking to me. She claimed that it would be difficult to clean because you can't vacuum tile floors, and the things that look like dirt are actually just stains. That response ignored things like the food processor having bits of food stuck on the bottom and in the blades for God knows how long, or just trying to vacuum anyway. How do I mention all of this to my girlfriend? I care about her deeply, obviously, and we communicate often about difficult topics. But this one just seems so offensive if I bring it up. It insults her and her family. I am embarrassed for my family to be there. And to be honest, I don't really want to stay there again either. I'm also afraid this could trickle into our eventual life together, so I'd like to broach the topic sooner rather than later. Thank you. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I don't think I understand why your parents have to meet and you're both adults, or why if they do, it has to be at your girlfriend's house. I just wouldn't do it. I think a far bigger problem is what the future looks like with your girlfriend if she thinks that's normal. It's totally possible her idea of spotless is your idea of only 90% disgusting. Honestly, I think it's likely she doesn't actually know how to clean. I strongly suggest that before you move into one home, you find a way to each live alone, closer but separately, so you can get a better idea of how compatible you are once she's away from her parents. I'm no clean freak, but I couldn't live with anyone who thought anything like that was remotely acceptable. Comment 2. Okay, you have more than a meet the parents problem. You have a serious future problem if you don't address it now. Different levels of cleanliness and working to achieve a modicum of cleanliness can destroy a relationship. If your girlfriend feels like the house is okay, she is going to be okay with future filth. Do you want to be doing all of the cleaning? This will truly be a test of your ability to communicate. Telling someone that the way they live now will not be acceptable to you can go sideways fast. Good luck. Have the discussion now. Don't let it drag out. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for checking in. So, 2 weeks ago, I finally decided to talk to my girlfriend about the cleanliness of her house. I was super nervous, but I knew it had to be done. I started by telling her how much I appreciated her and her family for letting me stay with them. Then, I gently brought up how I noticed some things around the house that made me uncomfortable. I tried to frame it as a concern for our future together, rather than a criticism of her family. At first, she was really defensive. She said that her family had always lived that way, and that it was normal for them. I could tell she was hurt, and I felt terrible. But then, something unexpected happened. She admitted that she had noticed the dirt and grime too, but she didn't know how to bring it up with her parents. She said she had been embarrassed about it for a long time, but didn't want to disrespect her family's way of living. We talked for hours that night. She told me about how her parents had always been more focused on other things, like their jobs and her education, and that cleaning had never been a priority. She said she had tried to clean up a few times, but her parents would just tell her it wasn't necessary. It was a really emotional conversation, but it felt good to finally get everything out in the open. The next day, my girlfriend decided to talk to her parents about it. She was really nervous, but I told her I would support her no matter what. When she brought it up, her parents were surprisingly understanding. They admitted that they had let things go for too long and that they were willing to make some changes. They even asked my girlfriend to help them come up with a cleaning schedule. Over the next week, my girlfriend and her parents started cleaning the house together. They bought new cleaning supplies and even hired a professional cleaning service to do a deep clean. It was a lot of work, but the house started to look so much better. My girlfriend was really proud of the progress they were making, and I was proud of her for taking the initiative. But then, something unexpected happened. My girlfriend's parents started arguing a lot more. They were stressed out from the cleaning and the changes in their routine. My girlfriend told me that her dad had even mentioned getting a divorce. It was really hard for her to hear, and she felt guilty for bringing up the cleanliness issue in the first place. I tried to reassure her that it wasn't her fault and that her parents' problems were deeper than just the state of the house. But she was still really upset. She started to question whether she wanted to stay with me because she felt like our relationship had caused all this turmoil in her family. We had another long talk, and I told her that I loved her and that I wanted to be with her no matter what. I said that we could work through this together and that I would support her in any way I could. She said she needed some time to think, and I agreed to give her space. A few days later, my girlfriend called me and said she wanted to meet up. When we saw each other, she told me that she had decided to stay with me. She said that she realized her parents' problems were not her fault and that she couldn't control their actions. She also said that she wanted to build a future with me and that we could create our own way of living together. We decided to take things one step at a time. My girlfriend is still helping her parents clean the house, but she's also setting boundaries and making sure she's taking care of herself. We're planning to have my parents over for dinner at a restaurant instead of her house, so that everyone can meet in a neutral setting. As for her parents, they're still working through their issues. They're going to couples therapy and trying to communicate better. It's not easy, but they're making an effort. My girlfriend and I are hopeful that things will get better for them. Looking back, I realize that this whole situation has brought us closer together. We've learned a lot about each other and about how to handle difficult conversations. It's been a tough couple of weeks, but I feel like we're stronger because of it. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.